If I talk too fast, or if I start mumbling, or if I wander away from the microphone, just yell at me, because I get a bit excited when I get nervous. I'm going to talk to you today about cognitive accessibility. The title of this talk is Designing for All Minds, Enhancing Cognitive Accessibility in Drupal. It will be a bit more about cognitive accessibility, slightly less about Drupal today, because that's just the way the talk went. I'm Maria Young. I am a Drupal developer, have been for 12 years or so. I'm also an accessibility lead. I'm a certified professional in web accessibility. Certification is from the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. That's what that little blue sticker there is. I'm quite proud of it. When I'm not doing either of those things, I live in the Scottish borders. I live on a small holding. I've got ducks and chickens and bees. We grow vegetables and flowers and sell them at the local community-run market. So, I work with Agile Collective. These are my colleagues, most of them. We develop websites, and we're lovely. And we might be hiring soon, so if you think we're lovely, then you can come and talk to us. So this is a brief overview of what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to do a little bit just around understanding cognitive disabilities and cognitive accessibility. I'm going to introduce you to the COGA working group. I'll tell you what that stands for when we get there. We'll go through some of the key principles for enhancing cognitive accessibility. And then I will give you some truly inspirational closing thoughts, or I might not. And we can hopefully have time for questions. So briefly, digital accessibility, ensuring that the products we build do not put barriers to access. Put up barriers to access for people with disabilities. We pay particular attention to the requirements of people with disabilities in the world of accessibility, but the benefits are universal. As creators of web content and products and things, we are creating environments which can intentionally or unintentionally make it really hard or impossible for people to do things on them. And if we use the social model of disability to describe this, we are disabling people through what we build. So yeah, this is this perspective that the environment can disable people is known as the social model of disability. There are other models available, but I like to hold this in mind as when I'm doing my work. So I think accessibility is one of the key tenets of UX. It is part of that sphere. It's not another thing added on. Accessibility in general is usually categorized into these 5 or 6 main types. Vision, to do with sight, covers things like visual impairment, blindness, or color blindness, anything to do with perception through your eyes. Hearing, motor, which is to do with your movement, touch, motor control, that kind of thing. Speech, and then cognitive. And today we're going to be looking specifically on this last one. Why? Because it's interesting. And there's not been so much work done in this area up to now. There's suddenly quite a lot more that's coming out about it through quite a lot of things that have happened in the last little while, not least COVID and the stresses that put people under. Lots of things around that seem to have just meant there's a lot more work in this arena. Cognitive, just to define the word, so cognitive cognition is to do with mental action or process of acquiring knowledge and understanding through thought, experience, and the senses. So it's the stuff that's going on in our brain. I'll get more to that shortly. Okay, understanding cognitive disabilities. Okay, what are cognitive disabilities? Cognitive and learning disabilities include long-term, short-term, recurrent or permanent difficulties relating to cognitive functions such as attention and focus, language and literacy, learning, memory, and executive function. I find this really useful as a tool to kind of understand, because these are different functions. There are others as well, but these are different functions that are going on in our brain. And a cognitive disability or cognitive impairment can impact one or more of these functions, but not necessarily all of them. There are lots of diagnoses that you might have heard of that are in this sphere, which can affect different cognitive functions. I can name some of them, but the thing is that they don't all affect people in the same way. So everybody who experiences ADHD does not experience the same cognitive function difference. So it's useful just to talk about the different things, really, that are going on when we're looking at cognitive accessibility. I'll just talk through a few examples of the barriers that people might face in using the internet, websites. So people who have issues with focus, and that can be keeping focus or being so focused that you forget to look at anything else. So they might have difficulty finishing a task if there are lots of distractions and interruptions coming up all the time. So we need to think about how we can signpost them back to what they were trying to do in the first place after their attention is lost. Folk with language-related difficulties, so maybe dyslexia, can need clear language and instructions. Some people really like to have supporting graphics, images, multimedia to go alongside the text, and familiar symbols to help understand the content. Some people find non-literal, like metaphors and similes, impossible to interpret, so using literal language can really help. Lots of people find new icons that they've never seen before really very opaque, difficult. Let's move on. Getting the picture? That kind of thing, okay. So environmental or situational things that can impact our cognitive function. It's a really hard word to say fast. So stuff that's going on around us or stuff that's happened to us. So when we're really tired, because it's the end of a long Drupal camp, we've been concentrating all day long, so it's hard to get words out, hard to concentrate, easier to get distracted. When people have suffered a bereavement, their cognitive impairment is extremely impacted. If you're in acute pain, but also if you're working in a place with lots of distractions, lots of loud, that can really affect your ability to take in, retain, learn new information. And working in a language which isn't your first language, that's a really big thing. It puts a lot more stress or stuff on your brain. So you have to interpret something. So these are all such situations where our cognitive function can be impaired. And then the other big thing to note is that there's a lot of words on this slide, and it's really small on my screen. But the global share of population aged 60 years or over is expected to reach over 20% by 2050. And the majority of people over 60 years old, maybe I should read it off here, notice a decline in memory and executive function related to age-associated memory impairment, mild cognitive impairment, and less frequently dementia, and there's some statistics there. I've got a link to where I've got this information from. But this means that more and more people are dependent on others for things that they could do themselves, increasing the crippling cost of care and reducing human dignity. So let's make things better. Okay. Cognitive load theory, another thing that I found quite useful in understanding some of this stuff that's going on in our brains, I think was developed by a guy called John Sweller. I don't know who he was. Here is a really, really unscientific picture of a brain. And I don't know where the arrows are pointing to are meant to mean anything. But the main point is there are three types of cognitive load that can be going on. And this is just a way to describe what's going on, let's say. So the intrinsic load is just how difficult a thing is to do, its inherent level of difficulty. Some things are harder to do than other things. Filling out your tax return is much harder than sending an email, an easy email. Extraneous cognitive load is how that information is presented to the person. So that's something that we as web developers, if that's what we are, or content creators, have a bit more control of. We can't control the intrinsic load of a task, but we can control how it's presented to people. And the domain, I had to look up that word when I came across it, is how, what does it say there? Linking new information with current information. So how we are linking this new thing that we're doing with all of the schema in our mind that we already have. How familiar are these terms to us? Have we done it before? Basically the state that we're doing, that we're in while we're processing this new information. So we have no control, as web developers, we have no control over the intrinsic load. We want to increase the domain, so we want to increase people seeing things that they've seen before to make it easier for them to understand, and we want to do that by decreasing the extraneous load. Following? Okay, got some nods. The Cognitive Accessibility Working Group, shorthanded to COGA from the first three letters of cognitive, were brought together by the W3C, who are responsible for web standards. They have the mission of improving accessibility of web content applications and digital content for people with cognitive disabilities and people with learning disabilities. And they do that through, they've done a load of research and analysis. They have developed guidelines and techniques which basically they're feeding into the web content accessibility guidelines. I'll come to that in a second. And they're suggesting new techniques to improve the state of cognitive accessibility. They've produced a couple of big documents, a screenshot of one of them. Don't try and read that off the screen. I mean, do read it. Do read it, but don't try and read it there. So this is the, which one's that? The roadmap and gap analysis. So they looked at the state of cognitive accessibility, they looked at the web content accessibility guidelines, and they put this roadmap together for what is missing. It's a really long but very interesting document. Take your time over reading it. But the web content accessibility guidelines, if you hadn't heard of them, are a set of, it's shortened to WCAG, set of testable guidelines which we can test our digital content against. We're currently on version 2.2, which came out, 2.2 I think came out last year, at the beginning of last year, and there are quite a few more guidelines there which do address cognitive accessibility issues. A lot of those are in the AAA level, which is often regarded as the optional level, but there's still a lot more work to go. So there's some links to a couple of these documents. The making content usable is the one I'll be referring to a bit more in this. Okay, there's quite a lot of content here. I'm going to go fast. Key principles for enhancing cognitive accessibility. I've structured the rest of this talk around the guidelines set out in the Making Content Usable document that the COGO working groups brought out. The key principles, in this Making Content Usable guideline, they basically expanded on each of these key principles that I'm about to tell you about, and there's lots of user stories and evidence to back up the claims. And then they have described a lot of patterns for how that we can put them into action. And they've also suggested some new techniques, attributes, that haven't been developed yet, but that might be interesting, that might be coming down the line. So right at the end, I've mentioned a couple of them that I think are interesting. So the key principles, I'll rattle through them really quickly and then we'll go through them a little bit more. Help users understand what things are and how to use them. Help users find what they need. Use clear and understandable content. Help users avoid mistakes and know how to correct them. Help users focus. Ensure processes don't rely on memory. Provide help and support adaptation and personalization. So, number one, I numbered mine, Finn. This is a trick you can use, so I know where we are. Number one, help users understand what things are and how to use them. So imagine you're searching for a piece of content. You find yourself on a piece of content on a new website you've never been to. The first thing you do before you even start reading is try and make sense of what the layout is, what's going on. You have to understand how you're supposed to interface and navigate this site, and what design patterns are being utilized here. So we want to use things that are familiar enough to the user, so they don't have to learn new symbols, they don't have to learn new terms, they don't have to understand a new design pattern. We want predictable design patterns. We want to use clear layouts. I've got some images on here, but I'm not going to describe them unless they need to be, because it's covered in the content. Clear layout. Let's go back though. Yeah, okay, no. What have I done? Let's do that instead. So we want to use familiar patterns. Let's put things in expected places. Let's make it clear where things are. Let's put things in the header that go in the header. Navigation, let's make it clear what is the main site navigation. We want to do that both in the visual layout, but also please use your semantic HTML, because we shouldn't forget, even though we're discussing cognitive accessibility, about people who are using screen readers and non-visual users who also need to know what things are when they visit a website. So we want to use header elements for our headers. We want to use the navigation element for our main site navigation. It just helps people get a sense of the layout of the page and what to expect to find there. If you want to innovate and play with breaking common design patterns, don't do it on stuff that's really important, that's really critical for people to find, and test it. Make interactive things obvious. This is a picture of a door. It's called a Norman door, after one of the Norman design gurus. And the problem here is we've got a glass door, and it's got these big, long handles on both the inside and the outside. So when you approach this door, it's really not clear whether you're supposed to push and pull it. I can't even work out how to push and pull a door if it says push or pull on it. So, this throws me. We're always unconsciously looking for clues on how to use things, and the way that things are designed give us those clues often. And if they're well designed, we shouldn't even need to think about it. There's a technical term for this is affordances. You can read about that later. But mostly interactive things on our websites, links, buttons, checkboxes, they all behave in different ways. And they are all interactive, so we need to make sure they look interactive, and they should be recognizable what they do. So we want to underline links. Usually, we want to make links clear that they're links at least. Underlining them is really good. We want to make sure they have a visual change on hover and focus, because we're giving people feedback that it's going to do something. Don't use links as buttons. Don't use buttons as links. If you do, learn how to make a button a real button, all the way down to the core. You can give an area role a button. That doesn't make it into a button. Buttons behave in a particular way for keyboards and touch and clicks. So, yes, there we are. That's my rant. Helpful icons. A screenshot here of these are all the controls in Google Meet controls. There's, I think, 12 or 13 of them. You all use Google Meet? Probably. How many times have you had to describe where the share screen button is? Oh, you see the thing that looks like a hand to the left of the hand? You know. It's really helpful. It's best practice to give text labels to things. Icons can be really helpful. They can help people understand what things do. They support using icons to support visible labels. For some people, the icons are much more useful than the label itself. But for lots of people, interpreting what the icons mean, trying to understand what the designer meant when they came up with a set of icons is almost impossible. It's also really hard, by the way, if you are using voice activation software to operate your computer, to name any of these buttons. You have to have a guess at what the accessible name is for the hand icon. There are other ways to do it, but it's just harder. You're just placing people under more cognitive load. Oh, look, I wrote some words. Use icons to support visible labels, cool, and don't assume people will understand your icon. Okay, number 2, help users find what they need. So back to the example, we've landed on some content, we've oriented ourselves, now we've got to work out whether this was the content that we're looking for. So we're going to just scan that content. We all do this automatically, just scan the page, see if it looks like what we're looking for. So we want a really clear content structure. So things like informative page titles, headings to organize your content, and making those headings look visually distinct. Again, we want to use semantic headings so that everybody knows what is a heading and not just big text. Here's a wall of text, doesn't matter what it says, you can see it's really hard to scan. If we just break it up, or a similar piece of text with some headings, suddenly we can see, we chunk the information, we can scan down the headings and work out if this was the content we were looking for. Hopefully not. Headings. Headings should follow a proper order. The content that follows the heading should relate to the heading that precedes it. Headings aren't just for making big text. And the other thing I just want to say, just if you've got critical information on a page, pull it out, make it really obvious, bring it to the top. It's really frustrating if you're researching something. I live in Scotland, researching something, not till right at the end, I discover it's only applicable to England and Wales. This is we want to help people find what they need. Back to, I've got a bit of Drupal in here. This was mentioned in Gareth's talk earlier, but I'm a really big fan of this module editor, really, to help your content people create good, accessible, structured content. We've got a screenshot here at the bottom of the kind of interface. As you're editing content, it can give you feedback on things like your heading levels. and tell you, it looks like maybe you've skipped a heading level here. This is why that's important, that kind of thing. And if it seems if you give editors feedback as they go, they're much more likely to fix it there and then. If you wait for a scan to come back, whenever your scans come back, they're likely not going to fix it. We're still on let users find what they need. This is one that I just discovered recently. So this is an accordion disclosure thing. So we've got a couple of closed ones and an open one there. The arrows are broken, fix that. But this is letting the in-page search, your control find, search within the content that's hidden on the page. So hidden has an optional attribute of until found. So you can just use hidden on its own and it hides it. And then it won't work with your in-page search. But if you use hidden until found, you can just find it at control effort to find the content that's hidden on the page. I thought it was cool. Use clear and understandable content. Okay, quick. Use clear and understandable content. Lots of people talk about doing really simple content, and they think that means you have to talk like you're talking to a child. That's not right. You just need to use clear, appropriate language for the content that you're producing. Do explain abbreviations and jargon, particularly abbreviations first time on the page, but as often as they come up, if it's helpful. You can provide summaries of long and complex information. Videos, images. If you're explaining how to do something, there's a good example of passport photos. Give examples of what passport photos won't be allowed, what you can't have in your background, to help people understand what you're asking them to do. Okay, help users avoid mistakes and know how to correct them. I think I've got, I think the next couple we're basically talking a bit more about forms and error handling, that kind of thing. I thought I'd put transitions on there, but never mind. Okay, so when we're building forms, again, we want to use visible labels for our forms to show people what you're asking them for. Use visible labels. Don't make the mistake of putting it in the placeholder text. You know that thing where it says your first name in the placeholder text, and then you start typing in it, and the placeholder text has disappeared, and then maybe you walk away and you come back and you go, what was I doing? So you have to actually delete everything out of the field to work out whether you were writing the right thing in the first place. Provide helpful help text underneath your fields if it is complex information. If you need it in a particular format, give examples of what that format should look like. Again, use that, so keep it visible. Don't just rely on the placeholder text to do that for you. If you can, allow for different formats. Don't insist on a particular format. If you can, and then process that in the back end to put it into the format that you need it. Just try and help people not to make errors, not to be tripped up by the system to give them the information that you've asked for. Autofill is really useful. One of the WCAG success criteria is one of the ones I always have to read again and again. If you're asking for somebody's, my data, you can define what it is that you're asking so that my autofill can fill that out correctly. If you're asking me to fill out somebody else's data, you don't want autofill to think that you just want my details again. So using those autofill values, attributes correctly can really help with that. And inline form errors. Drupal module in core. You have to enable it. It's really good. Provides much more helpful error text, and the whole error interface is much, much easier than what you get out of the box. I recommend it. Okay, help users focus. So, it turns out that form that we're trying to fill out, it's really, really long. It's asked for loads of stuff that I don't know off the top of my head, like my passport number, or my date of birth, or my cat's date of birth, or something. Yeah, don't know them, so I'm going to have to go and find some information. So I wander off to go and find some information, and what happens while I'm off getting those things, like my cats will want fed always, my mum will call, and then I'll better make a cup of tea, and then, what was I doing? We can't design for what's going on in people's lives, or their very demanding cats. But we can help by preparing them for what they're going to need up front. So you can, when you're designing your form, you can say, this is likely to take a long time. You're going to need these bits of information. Maybe go and get them before you start. And we can streamline our forms, and we should stream our forms to only be asking for the minimum amount of data. We're so often asked for so much stuff that is none of people's business. Like, if we don't need it for the interaction, and with the we now is the people developing the forms, we shouldn't be asking for it. And other distractions, like you're just about to check out and they're asking, somebody else who bought this wants that thing, and it's more likely to send me off down a rabbit hole. So I'll never buy the thing than to actually finish the checkout. So we need to limit those interruptions where possible. Just a little word about infinite scroll as another thing about we're still on helping users focus. This is I consider an infinite scroll like a very, very deceptive pattern. You're designing people to be addicts. You're helping people get lost in a thread. We need to design in breaks to just give people a moment to choose to keep on doing that thing. I'm sure none of us do it, but we've all experienced it. Okay, 6, getting out of time. Okay, so ensure processes don't rely on memory. This is a difficult one because we need to make sure that people are secure and people's information is secure. And particularly in the accessibility disability community, we need to be really careful because there's a lot of bad people out there. The ones that are trying to, not the scammers, the people who are preying on people who are vulnerable. Forcing users to rely on memorizing information that they gave you a long time ago is very difficult for all of us, I'm sure. I even find copying my 2FA code from my phone onto my computer, six digits, I cannot remember it from there to there. So, it's like I hold it up and type like this so that... And what's going to happen is I check my phone to get my TFA, and my mum calls, and then I'm lost again. So, we need to have password policies, but read about what makes a really good password policy. There's a bit of research to show it's not all of those things that we are asked to do. That doesn't make for secure passwords. People don't choose secure passwords that way if you just make them put in lots of weird stuff. But most importantly, don't disable copy and paste. People can use secure password management systems, and if they can't copy and paste from those into your thing, then you're putting up a serious barrier. Provide help and support. Provide help from real humans, if you can, some access to humans, because some things are just really hard to find out. And talking to a person to help me through a thing that I'm struggling with is almost essential sometimes. And supporting adaptation and personalization. I'm running out of time, so 5 minutes. Okay, you won't have any questions. Okay, so personalization and adaptation. This is a really interesting and growing area. It's basically allowing the users to choose how they are interacting with the site, depending on their needs and preferences. And this is, particularly important with cognitive accessibility because what works for one person, is not going to work for every person. So letting people have a bit more control about how they're interacting with website and interface. So there are lots of browser extensions and APIs out there that can help people do that. That can be from universally changing text sizes and line spacing and fonts on websites so it makes them more easy for you to read. There's other ones too. Some of the things that are coming down the line in supporting personalization. Here is a screenshot from the big document I pointed to earlier for one of the ways this might happen. So what we're seeing here is an article, two screenshots of an article about how to make a cup of tea. And beside each word of the title, how to make a cup of tea, in the first one we've got a set of symbols there. Now these can be useful for people who are really struggling to understand the written language, who understand symbols better. So there is work going into making a common language, translatable common language, so that symbols can be used to basically wholly translate a page. So that's the sort of universal one that's being developed. I don't know if it's really universal, but it's one. But then the other option is that people can use their own symbols. So you could turn this on, you could upload your set of symbols to recognize common words to help you see what you're being asked for. It's going to be maybe more obvious in common fields that you're asked to fill out. So you'll just see, I would have my own face on the name field, and I'd remember I'd recognise that's what's being asked for. That is the WAI Adapt is the whole sort of series of things around that. You can look into that. The next one is supporting simplification. Again, this is not live yet, as far as I understand. But it's either going to be, I've seen it written two ways, data simplification, attribute that we can put on things, or adapt simplification, attribute. And we could mark things up as critical so that we could then trigger something, turn something off for focus mode, and suddenly you're only seeing the stuff on the page that's critical. And all of the other stuff, your ads, whatever it is, would be hidden for now. And then we could probably toggle it back on again, just to help you kind of focus on what's really important. Obviously, people will misuse it, but it's an interesting developments that are coming down the line. Okay, I don't have time for inspirational closing thoughts. What shall I say? Okay.
Yeah, go on, because we always got
Look, I mean, just generally, right? Working in accessibility requires being a bit nimble in the way that you think about things. And you have to, you just need to talk to people about how they experience the world and how they use the web and how they are interacting with things. And why that's really helpful is because then that becomes part of the bank of knowledge that you can refer to when you are now looking at this new thing, this thing that you've designed 100 times before, and then you hear about how my mum struggles with it, or different experiences struggle with it. So what I want to say really is just don't stop learning about this. It's really important. It's critical. But you don't have to get it all right now. You just have to try, and we'll just do a little bit better. There is such an incredible accessibility community out there. This week was AXCON, which is the big accessibility conference run by DQ. It's all online. All of the videos you sign up for free. There is such a lot of amazing content from some of the world's best accessibility speakers out there. Just every time I read something, I watch it again and I learn something new. And it's, you know, it just broadens your mind, which is fun. Okay, I think we've got time for questions. Any questions?
I promise we'll all be sat next door at 10 past.
Okay.
Okay? So, we've got time for one or two questions.
One or two questions.
One or two.
I can't throw that far.
No, that's fine. I'll shout. First off, thank you. It was a brilliant session. And also a really good point about the Norman Law thing. The design of everyday things is a brilliant book that you wrote. My question's around the forms and around things like radio buttons, for example. If you've got a yes or no, but one of them needs additional context, should you put that within the answer itself on the radio button, or should you put it within the description underneath? What would be a better approach for that without, you know, the cognitive overwhelming?
I was going to repeat that for the recording. So the question is specifically about radio buttons. If you've got a yes/no options on radio buttons, but one of those answers needs more context than the other one, do you want to put the context within the answer, or as a sort of description with the label? I assume. Give a standard accessibility answer. It depends. I think I need to see the thing itself in context. I mean, there's quite a lot of factors running through my brain about making sure it's properly ARIA described, so that all of that's information. Yeah, it depends.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's something that I've played around with before. I can't think off the top of my head the example now, because otherwise I'll give you. But basically, yeah, it would be a yes or no, and then the no, for example, would say, or the yes, sorry, would say, we'll be back in touch before using blah, 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 whatever else. Like, you know, we're going to use it as an example for something, if you're leaving a comment, for example. And I've always been debating between whether or not it should be in the actual answer itself, or whether or not it's easier to actually look at and read by being the standard yes or no, because from the other side, I've always thought, is it putting undue prominence on one by making it a much larger answer than the other?
Very good question. I don't know the answer to that, I'm afraid.
Thank you.
Maybe Ansha does, though.
Well, one option is to actually not have a yes or no, but already rephrase the yes. So yes, you can have a yes or no and an explanation on one of them, or you can actually rephrase your labels so that it's not yes or no, but the text that includes that. Nice. So try think out of the box as well.
Yeah, thank you.
And who wants this box now?
Cool. Can we get the box to you, please? Can we just throw it forwards?
Can I add to that and say that I think the thing that's really important there is adding consequences in, because what happens if you click yes? What happens if you click no? What people really want to do in forms is, you know, they're doing it for a reason. So it's the consequences that are important.
Oh, don't give it back to me. Right, I'll launch back to you, then you can throw it down your graph.
I think we're going to have to finish at that point, I'm afraid. Thank you.